You held me back. Do you know what opportunities I'd have without being tied to a hospital maintenance worker? My wife sneered. Then she lied about having malaria to hide the STD she caught from her lover during that so-called humanitarian trip. My name's Will Parker, maintenance supervisor at Mercy General, which means I fix the broken things while everyone else breaks them. And boy, was I about to find out how many things were broken. My wife Emma had been back from her humanitarian mission in the Pacific for exactly 3 days, and something smelled worse than the emergency room. On a Saturday night, she got off that plane a mess, looking like she'd been hit by a truck, pale, sweating, shaking like a leaf in a tornado. It's the malaria pills, she had explained, barely looking me in the eye. Side effects, you know. The doctor said it's normal. Malaria pills, right? More like tall tale pills, if you ask me. Emma Parker, my wife of 8 years, a dedicated emergency room nurse, a supposed saint of mercy, was currently sprawled on our king-size bed like she owned the world. Her suitcase was open on the dresser, and I had been playing the part of the devoted husband, unpacking her things while she recovered from her tropical illness. That's when I found it, buried under her uniforms and that ridiculous sun hat she had bought for the trip. A gold-embossed VIP pass, fancy as hell, with the words Pacific Aid Gala, Donor Appreciation Weekend, printed in elegant script. Underneath that, a guest list with about 30 names, half of them crossed out in Emma's handwriting. And at the bottom of the suitcase, like the cherry on top, was a photograph. Emma, radiant in a red dress I had never seen her in, standing among 6 men in expensive suits. They all had their arms around her waist. They were all smiling like they had just won the lottery. And Emma, my Emma, was looking at the camera as if she were posing for the cover of Nurses Gone Wild. Will, her voice came from the bedroom, weak and pitiful. Could you get me some water? I feel dizzy again. I stared at that photograph for a long moment, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. A humanitarian mission, right? The kind of mission where you dress up in designer clothes and pose with rich donors while people are supposed to be dying of malaria. Sure, honey, I replied, slipping the photo into my back pocket. Just a second. I was filling a glass at the kitchen sink when my phone rang. Dr. Martinez from the downtown clinic, Emma's primary care physician, Will. It's Dr. Martinez. I have Emma's test results from yesterday. Test results. I frowned. What tests? A pause. She didn't tell you. She came in yesterday morning for some tests. Said she'd been having symptoms since she got back from her trip. My grip on the phone tightened. What kind of symptoms? Well, the good news is, it's not malaria. The bad news is, well, it's chlamydia, a pretty advanced case. In fact, she'll need antibiotics, and you should probably get tested too. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. Water and broken glass spread across the tiles, just like my world was falling apart at the seams. Will, are you there? Yes, I managed to say. Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. Emma seemed pretty upset. She asked me to call you directly. Upset, sure. I bet she was upset. Upset that she got caught. Thanks, doctor. I'll take care of it. I hung up and stared at the mess on the floor. Chlamydia, not malaria. And she had known since yesterday. She had gone to the doctor without telling me. She had gotten the diagnosis and then had come home to tell me that story about the side effects of the anti-malarials. Will, Emma's voice again, more insistent now. Where's that water? I looked at the broken glass, then at the ceiling where my wife lay in our bed, probably planning her next lie. 8 years of marriage. 8 years thinking I knew who I had married. I'm coming, honey, I shouted, grabbing a towel to clean up the mess. I just had a little accident. Accident. That's what our whole marriage was turning into. One big, ugly accident. I went upstairs slowly, the glass of water in my hand. That photograph burning a hole in my back pocket. Emma was propped up against the pillows, looking fragile and innocent. Her blonde hair was in a messy bun, and she had on that old Northwestern University t-shirt I bought her for her birthday 3 years ago, playing the part of the devoted wife, recovering from her noble sacrifice. You're an angel, she said, taking the water with a grateful smile. I don't know what I'd do without you. I sat on the edge of the bed, studying her face. So, tell me more about this mission. It sounds like it was pretty intense. Her gaze flickered for just a second, but I noticed it. Oh, you know, long hours, tough conditions. We were working in some very remote areas. It must have been hard being away from proper medical facilities. Very hard. She took a sip of water, avoiding my eyes. But we managed. The people there were so grateful for our help. I can imagine. I pulled the photograph out of my pocket and put it on the nightstand, especially these 6 guys. Emma's face went white, whiter than when she got off that plane. The water glass was trembling in her hands. Well, I can what? Explain why you're dressed like you're going to the Oscars while you're supposed to be treating malaria patients in the jungle. It's not what it looks like. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Really, because it looks like my wife went on a luxury vacation, slept with a bunch of rich donors, and came home with a sexually transmitted disease. The glass slipped from her fingers and bounced on the comforter, soaking the sheets. Emma's mouth was opening and closing like a gasping fish. How? Dr. Martinez called. Chlamydia, Emma, not malaria. Chlamydia. Then she started to cry. Big, dramatic tears that might have worked on me a week ago before I found the photo, before I got the call, before I realized that the woman I had been married to for 8 years was a complete stranger. Well, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you lied to me about where you were going. How you lied about what you were doing. How you lied about being sick. I got up, pacing to the window. Or maybe you want to explain how you managed to catch an STD while supposedly saving lives in the Pacific. It's complicated. I'll bet. Now she was sobbing, mascara running down her cheeks. I never meant for this to happen. It just got out of hand. What got out of hand, Emma? The lies or the cheating? Both, she whispered. At least she was being honest about something. I went to our closet and started pulling out clothes. My clothes, jeans, t-shirts, work boots, everything that belonged to me. Emma watched from the bed, crying harder with each item I threw into my old duffel bag. What are you doing? What does it look like? I'm packing. You can't leave. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can. We can what? Pretend this never happened. Pretend my wife didn't spend 2 weeks on a bender on some tropical island while I was here, missing her like an idiot. I grabbed my toiletries from the bathroom. My razor, my toothbrush, all the little things that had made this place feel like home. Not anymore. When I got back to the bedroom, Emma had stopped crying. She was sitting up straight, and there was something different in her eyes. Something hard. Fine, she said. Go. Run away like you always do when things get tough. Like I always do. I stopped packing and stared at her. When have I ever run away from anything in our marriage? You ran away from having kids. You ran away from buying a real house. You ran away from every opportunity to better yourself. I ran away from having kids because we agreed to wait until we were financially stable. I ran away from buying a house because we couldn't afford it on our salaries, and I ran away from bettering myself. I've been working 60 hours a week for the last 3 years to support your career. Support my career. She laughed, but it was an ugly laugh. You've been holding me back. Do you know what kind of opportunities one could have if I wasn't tied down to a hospital maintenance worker? There it was. The truth, finally, not the tears, not the pleading, not the promises to fix things. This was what she really thought of me, of our marriage, of the life we had built together. Well, I said, zipping up the duffel bag. Now you don't have to worry about being held back anymore. I went to the dresser and pulled out the manila folder I had been hiding in my sock drawer for the last 6 months. The divorce papers I had drawn up after the 3rd time I caught her texting someone at 2 in the morning. The papers I had hoped I would never have to use. Emma's eyes went wide when she saw the folder. Will, don't. I had them drawn up months ago, I said, putting them on the bed beside her. Call it a gut feeling. She grabbed the papers, scanning the first page with growing horror. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. I'm done, Emma. Done with the lies, done with the cheating. Done being treated like I'm not good enough for you. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder and headed for the door. Where are you going? I paused in the doorway, looking back at the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. She looked small and pathetic, sitting there on our bed, surrounded by the wreckage of our marriage. Somewhere that doesn't smell like lies and tropical diseases, I said. And then I walked out, leaving her to scream my name at my back. The Riverside Motel wasn't exactly the Four Seasons, but it had 2 things going for it. It was cheap, and it was far enough from our house that I wouldn't accidentally run into Emma at the grocery store. The room smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, but at least it was honest about what it was. I had been there for 3 days when __ Kowalski showed up with a 6-pack of beer and a sympathetic grimace. Pete worked security at Mercy General on the night shift, which meant he saw everything that went on when the administrators went home. We had been friends for about 5 years, ever since I fixed the lock on the security office, and he shared his coffee with me. "Heard through the grapevine you and Emma are having some problems," he said, sitting in the room's only chair while I sat on the edge of the bed. "Problems?" I cracked open a beer and took a long swallow. That's one way to put it. Pete was the kind of guy who didn't push for details, one of the reasons I liked him. He was in his 50s, divorced, with the kind of weathered face you get from seeing too much of humanity's worst impulses. His dark hair was going gray at the temples, and he had a way of looking at you that made you feel like he had already heard whatever story you were about to tell. "Want to talk about it?" She cheated. Brought back a souvenir from her humanitarian mission. I made a vague gesture toward my groin of the kind that requires antibiotics. Pete winced. "That's rough, man." Best part. She tried to tell me it was malaria. Malaria doesn't usually affect those particular body parts. That's what I thought. We drank in a comfortable silence for a while, listening to the traffic outside and the couple in the next room, having what sounded like the same fight they had been having since I arrived. "So what's your plan?" Pete asked finally. "Plan? You can't just hide out in this crappy motel forever. Sooner or later you're going to have to go back to work, deal with the divorce, figure out what comes next." He was right. Of course, I had been avoiding reality for 3 days, living on vending machine food and cable television. But that couldn't last forever. I had to be back at work on Monday, which meant facing all the people who knew Emma and me as a couple. The hospital staff who had probably already heard through the gossip network that we were separated. I don't know, I admitted. I've never been divorced before. It's not fun, but you get through it. The important thing is to keep your dignity intact. Dignity. Right. It's a little hard to maintain your dignity when your wife comes home with an STD and then tries to convince you that you're imagining things. My phone vibrated with a text message. Emma, of course. She had been texting me every few hours since I left, alternating between apologies and accusations. "Please come home. We need to talk. I can explain everything." I showed the text to Pete. He read it and shook his head. Classic cheater's playbook. First they deny it, then they minimize it, and then they blame you for overreacting. She's already been through the first 2 stages. I'm waiting for the third. As if on cue, another text arrived. "You're being ridiculous." It was a mistake. People make mistakes. "There's your third stage," Pete said. I turned off the phone and threw it on the nightstand. "I can't deal with this right now. You're going to have to deal with it sooner or later, and when you do, you're going to need to be smart." "What do you mean?" Pete leaned forward, his expression serious. "I mean, Emma's not going to make this easy for you. She's going to try to control the narrative, make herself out to be the victim. You need to be prepared for that." He was right. Emma was image-conscious above all else. She had spent years building her reputation as the dedicated nurse, the caring professional, the perfect wife. She wasn't going to let a little thing like adultery ruin that image without a fight. Any advice? Document everything. Keep records of all your communications with her, and don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Don't slash her tires. Don't key her car. Don't show up at her job drunk and screaming. That kind of stupid. I hadn't planned on doing any of those things, but it was good to know they were off the table. We finished our beers and Pete left, promising to keep his ears open at work for any gossip that might be useful. After he was gone, I lay on the motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling and thinking about the last 8 years. Emma and I had met at the hospital, of course. She was a new nurse, fresh out of school, and I was the maintenance guy who had been called to fix a broken sink in the break room. She had been impressed that I could fix things instead of just calling someone else to do it. I had been impressed that she had bothered to learn my name instead of just calling me maintenance, like most of the medical staff did. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony at her parents' church. Nothing fancy. We couldn't afford fancy, but it had felt real. Emma had worn her grandmother's dress, and I had worn the only suit I owned. Her mother had cried. Her father had given me a firm handshake and told me to take care of his little girl. I had tried. God knows I had tried, but somewhere along the way, trying hadn't been enough. Emma had started to see our life as being too small for her. The apartment was too cramped. My job wasn't prestigious enough. Our friends weren't successful enough. She had started talking about opportunities, about networking, and about advancing her career. The Pacific Aid mission had been the latest in a series of professional development opportunities. Emma had applied to participate 6 months ago, describing it as a chance to use her skills to help people in need while also building her resume. I had supported her, even though it meant 2 weeks apart and a financial strain we couldn't really afford. I had been proud of her. That was the worst part. I had actually been proud that my wife was selfless enough to volunteer for humanitarian work. What a joke. Monday morning came too soon. I put on my work clothes, a navy blue uniform with Mercy General Maintenance embroidered on the pocket, and drove to the hospital like I had every weekday for the last 8 years. But now everything felt different. The familiar building looked the same, but I felt like I was seeing it with new eyes. The maintenance office was in the basement, next to the laundry room and the morgue. It wasn't exactly prime real estate, but it was quiet, and most people left us alone. My supervisor, Joe Martinez, was already there when I arrived, reading the morning's work orders over a cup of coffee that could strip paint. "Parker," he said, looking up from his clipboard. "You look like hell." "Thanks, Joe. You always know what to say to make a guy feel better." Joe was in his 60s with hands like tree roots and a face that had seen every kind of mechanical failure the hospital could produce. He had been working in maintenance for 30 years and had the cynical view of the world that came with the territory. "Heard you and Emma are having some problems." News traveled fast in a hospital, faster than most diseases and twice as contagious. "Where did you hear that?" "My wife plays bridge with Tassa Morrison. You know Tassa works in the ER with Emma." I knew Tassa. Blonde, vivacious, about as good at keeping a secret as a sieve is at holding water. If Tassa knew about our separation, then half the hospital probably already did. "What exactly did Tassa say?" Joe shrugged. "Just that Emma's been staying at her place for a few days. Said you two had a fight about her trip." "A fight, right? That's what we were calling it when your wife comes home with chlamydia." "It's more than a fight, Joe." "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Fair enough, but if it's going to affect your work, it won't." Joe studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, we've got a broken AC unit in the surgical wing and a clogged drain in the cafeteria. You think you can handle that without your personal life interfering?" "I can handle it, and I could." The work was the one thing in my life that made sense. Machines broke. I fixed them. Simple cause and effect, no hidden agendas or secret motivations. A broken air conditioner. Didn't lie to you about why it wasn't working. I was halfway through replacing the compressor in the surgical wing when I heard voices in the hallway. Emma's voice, along with 2 others I recognized. Tassa Morrison and Dr. Maribel Santos, Emma's closest friends at the hospital. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Emma was upset, and her friends were offering comfort and support. Loyal friends rallying around the wounded wife. How touching. I finished installing the compressor and packed up my tools, but instead of heading back to the basement, I took a detour through the ER. Call it morbid curiosity, but I wanted to see how Emma was handling our separation in public. She was standing at the nurse's station, filling out charts with the kind of focused intensity that meant she was trying not to think about anything else. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she was wearing the blue scrubs that brought out her eyes. To anyone who didn't know the truth, she looked like the dedicated professional she had always pretended to be. But now I knew the truth. Tassa was hovering nearby, occasionally casting concerned glances in Emma's direction. When she saw me, her expression changed from concern to something that looked almost like guilt. "Will," she said, her voice artificially bright. "How are you?" "I'm fine." "Casa, how are you?" "Oh, busy. Always busy around here." Emma looked up from her charts, and our eyes met for the first time since I walked out of our bedroom. She looked tired, older somehow, but there was something else in her expression, something that might have been hope. "Will," she said quietly, "can we talk?" "I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just for a minute." Tassa was watching this exchange like it was her favorite soap opera, and I could see other staff members starting to pay attention. The last thing I wanted was to provide entertainment for the hospital gossip mill. "Fine," I said, "but not here." Emma nodded and led me to one of the family consultation rooms. Small, private spaces where doctors give bad news to family members. How appropriate. She closed the door behind us and leaned against it, as if she were trying to keep me from escaping. "I know you're angry," she started. Angry doesn't even begin to describe it. But we can work through this. Marriage is about forgiveness. Marriage is about trust, Emma, and honesty. 2 things you seem to have forgotten about. Her composure cracked a little. "I made a mistake. I know that, but it doesn't have to end our marriage." "A mistake?" I laughed. but there was no humor in it. You didn't accidentally trip and fall on some guy's _ Emma. You made a series of choices. You chose to lie to me about what kind of trip you were going on. You chose to dress like you were going to a cocktail party instead of a humanitarian mission. You chose to sleep with someone else, and then you chose to lie to me about why you were sick. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Help me understand how my wife ends up with chlamydia while she's supposedly treating malaria patients. Emma's face flushed. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The expectations. What expectations? To sleep with the donors, to network, to make connections. Do you have any idea how competitive the healthcare industry is right now? How hard it is to advance your career without the right connections? So you decided to make connections with your vagina. She slapped me hard. The sound echoed in the small room like a gunshot. Don't you dare talk to me like that. I touched my cheek where her hand had left a red mark. Like what? Like someone who's sick of being lied to. Like some kind of, I didn't say you were one, Emma, but if the scrub fits. She raised her hand to slap me again, but I caught her wrist. Once was enough, I said, releasing her arm. We're done here, we'll wait. But I was already opening the door. Tassa was standing in the hallway, pretending to be busy with something on her phone, but it was obvious she had been listening. When she saw me come out, she quickly looked away. Enjoy the show, I asked her. Tassa's face turned red. I was just. Save it, I said and walked away. I spent the rest of the day fixing the clogged drain in the cafeteria, which seemed like an appropriate metaphor for my life. Everything was backing up, overflowing, making a mess that someone else would have to clean up. When I got back to the motel that night, I had 17 text messages from Emma and 3 voicemails. I deleted them all without reading or listening. Pete showed up around 8 with Chinese takeout and more beer. Heard you had a conversation with your wife today, he said, unpacking containers of lamen and sweet and sour pork. News travels fast. Tassa Morrison has a mouth like a bullhorn. According to her, Emma slapped you in the family consultation room. According to her, you weren't there? Pete grinned. I might have been walking by when it happened. I might have heard raised voices and nothing. Just thought you should know that people are talking. Great. As if my life wasn't complicated enough. Now I was going to be the subject of hospital gossip for the next 6 months. What are they saying? Depends on who you ask. Emma's friends are painting her as the victim. Poor, dedicated nurse whose husband doesn't understand the pressures of her career. Your friends are painting you as the victim. Hardworking guy whose wife cheated on him and gave him an STD. What do you think? Pete cracked open a beer and took a long swallow. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but closer to your side than hers. That's comforting. The thing is, Will, this is just the beginning. Emma's not going to give up easily. She has too much invested in her image to let this divorce go down quietly. What do you mean? I mean she's going to play dirty, try to make you look like the bad guy, like you're the one who destroyed the marriage. You need to be ready for that. I thought about Emma's words in the consultation room, the accusations that I had been holding her back, that I had run away from opportunities to better myself. It sounded like she was already building her case for why our marriage had failed, and it had nothing to do with her infidelity and everything to do with my shortcomings as a husband. Any suggestions? Yeah, don't give her any ammunition. Keep your head down, do your job, and let her dig her own grave. And if she doesn't dig her own grave, and if her version of events becomes the accepted truth? Pete grinned, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then, maybe you need to help her dig. The next few days passed in a blur of broken equipment and whispered conversations that would stop whenever I entered a room. The hospital gossip mill was working overtime, and I was apparently the main attraction. Some people looked at me with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with what might have been pity. Emma, meanwhile, had launched a full-scale charm offensive. She was picking up extra shifts, volunteering for committees, and generally acting like the most dedicated nurse in the history of medicine. The message was clear. She was the innocent victim of a failed marriage, carrying on despite her personal pain. It was a good strategy, I had to admit. Emma had always been popular with the staff, and now she was playing the part of the wronged wife to perfection. She had even started wearing her wedding ring again, which was a nice touch. I was eating lunch in the basement break room, a generous term for a closet with a microwave and 2 folding chairs, when Joe Martinez stuck his head in. Parker, you've got a visitor upstairs. Conference room B. A visitor. Lawyer says it's about your divorce. My stomach clenched. Emma had lawyered up. Of course she had. Conference room B was on the third floor, in the administrative wing where the people who actually ran the hospital had their offices. It was a small room with a polished table, uncomfortable chairs, and motivational posters that probably cost more than my monthly salary. The lawyer was exactly what I expected. Mid-40s, expensive suit, a briefcase that looked like it cost more than my car. He stood up when I walked in and held out a manicured hand. "Mr. Parker, I'm David Thornton, representing your wife in the divorce proceedings." I shook his hand without enthusiasm. "What can I do for you, Mr. Thornton?" "Please, call me David." I was hoping we could discuss the terms of the separation in a civilized manner without unnecessarily involving the courts. Translation. Emma wanted to settle this quickly and quietly before too many details about her Pacific adventure became public. "I'm listening." David opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Mrs. Parker is prepared to be quite generous in the settlement. She's willing to let you keep the apartment, the car, and most of the personal possessions. In return, she would like you to agree to a no-fault divorce with no public disclosure of the reasons for the separation. No public disclosure, no discussing the details of the marriage breakdown with mutual friends, colleagues, or family members. A standard confidentiality clause." I almost laughed. Emma wanted to buy my silence. She was willing to give up her share of our meager assets in exchange for keeping her reputation intact. "And if I don't agree to this confidentiality clause?" David's smile became a little forced. "Then we will have to proceed through the courts, which could become quite messy. Details that could be embarrassing to both parties could become a matter of public record." Embarrassing to both parties. "I'm not the one who came home with chlamydia. Mr. Parker, I understand that you're upset, but upset." I stood up, suddenly furious. My wife spent 2 weeks on a bender with rich donors while pretending to be on a humanitarian mission. She brought home a sexually transmitted disease and then lied to my face about it. Upset doesn't even begin to describe how I feel. David held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I understand that this is emotional for you, but we're trying to find a solution that works for everyone." "A solution that works for Emma, you mean?" "Mrs. Parker has a career to consider. She's built a reputation in this community, a reputation built on lies. Nevertheless, taking this to court will not benefit anyone. It will be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately destructive to both of your reputations." I sat back down, trying to think clearly through my anger. David was right about one thing. A public divorce proceeding would be messy and expensive, but Emma's offer felt like she was trying to get away with the consequences of her actions. I need some time to think about it, of course, but I should mention that this offer has an expiration date. Mrs. Parker is willing to be generous now, but if this drags on, she may be forced to take a more adversarial approach. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Divorce proceedings can become quite ugly when both parties are determined to air their grievances in public. After David left, I sat in the conference room for a long time, looking out the window at the parking lot where Emma and I used to meet for lunch when we first started dating. Those seemed like memories from someone else's life. Now my phone vibrated with a text from Pete. "Need to talk. Important. Meet me in the security office after your shift." The security office was in the basement, next to the maintenance department. Pete was waiting for me with a grim expression and his own manila folder. "We need to talk," he said, locking the door behind me. "About what?" "About your wife's boyfriend." It felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Is what?" "Sit down, Will." I sat in the chair across from Pete's desk, my legs suddenly shaky. I did some digging after our conversation the other night. Called in a few favors from people I know in hospital security around the country. Pete opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. They were grainy, obviously taken with a telephoto lens, but the subjects were clearly identifiable. Emma, wearing the red gala dress from the photo I had found, dancing with a tall, dark-haired man in an expensive tuxedo. His name is Dr. Felix Dalton, Pete said, orthopedic surgeon, works at Presbyterian Hospital downtown, divorced, drives a BMW, lives in a penthouse in the financial district. I stared at the photographs, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. Emma looked happy in the photos, happier than I had seen her in months. "How did you get these?" The Pacific Aid Gala was a big event. Lots of local media coverage, society photographers. These were published in the lifestyle section of the Seattle Times. He pulled out more photos. Emma and Felix at a restaurant. Emma and Felix walking on the beach. Emma and Felix getting into his BMW outside a hotel. There's more, __ said quietly. Felix Dalton has a reputation. He's been linked to several nurses over the years, usually married once. The guy likes to play homewrecker. I felt sick. How long has this been going on? From what I could find, they met at a medical conference about 6 months ago. The Pacific Aid mission was just a convenient excuse for them to spend 2 weeks together. 6 months. Emma had been cheating on me for 6 months, and I had been too stupid to see it. Is there anything else? Pete said. Felix Dalton is also married. His wife is Dr. Catherine Dalton. She's a cardiologist at the same hospital. They have 2 kids. So Emma wasn't just a cheater, she was a homewrecker too. Perfect. What am I supposed to do with this information? That's up to you. But I thought you should know what you're up against. I gathered up the photographs and put them back in the folder. Emma's lawyer came to see me today. She wants to settle quietly with a confidentiality clause. Of course she does. She can't have this getting out and ruining her reputation. Hiya Felix's. Pete nodded. A 2-for-1 scandal. The local medical community would have a field day with this. I thought about David Thoron's offer. The apartment, the car, the quick, quiet divorce in exchange for my silence. It was a good deal, financially speaking, but it also meant that Emma would get away with it. She would keep her job, her reputation, her friends, while I would be the guy who couldn't make his wife happy. What would you do? I asked Pete. I'd make them pay, not necessarily in court, but I'd make sure they understood that actions have consequences. What do you mean? Pete leaned back in his chair, a calculating look on his face. I mean, Emma and her boyfriend have been playing with other people's lives. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor. I'm not going to do anything illegal. Who said anything about illegal? There are plenty of ways to make someone's life difficult without breaking any laws. I left the hospital that night with Pete's folder under my arm and my head full of dark thoughts. Emma wanted to keep this quiet, control the narrative, make sure her reputation remained intact while our marriage fell apart in private. But maybe __ was right. Maybe it was time to stop being the nice guy, the understanding husband, the victim who went quietly into the night. Maybe it was time to fight back. I was walking through the hospital parking lot when I saw Emma's car, a silver Honda Civic we bought together 3 years ago. It was parked in her usual spot, under the light near the ER entrance. On an impulse, I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the license plate. Then I walked around the car, looking for anything that might be useful. In the back seat, I could see a gym bag and what looked like a change of clothes working late or meeting Felix after her shift. I was about to leave when I noticed something tucked under the windshield wiper. A parking ticket. Emma had parked in a visitor's space instead of the employee lot. A minor infraction, but it gave me an idea. I pulled out my phone and called the hospital parking enforcement office. This is Will Parker from maintenance, I said when someone answered. I'm calling to report a vehicle that's been illegally parked in the visitor's lot for several hours. It was a petty move. I knew that. But as I watched the parking enforcement people put a second ticket on Emma's windshield, I felt a small surge of satisfaction. Actions have consequences. Emma was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I drove back to the motel with Pete's folder on the passenger seat and a plan starting to form in my mind. Emma wanted to play nice, but she was about to find out that I had learned the rules too, and I wasn't going to play fair anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since this whole mess began. Emma wanted to control the narrative, keep everything quiet, preserve her precious reputation while she played house with Dr. Felix Dalton. But information, I had learned, was power, and thanks to Pete, I had a lot of information. I spent my lunch break at the public library, using their computers to research Felix Dalton. What I found painted a picture of a man who lived a very public life. Social media profiles, hospital newsletters, photos from charity events. He liked to be seen, to be admired, to be the center of attention. That was going to be a problem for him. Felix's Instagram account was a masterpiece of narcissistic self-promotion. Pictures of his BMW, of his penthouse, of his expensive watches, of his perfectly sculpted abs at the gym, and scattered throughout like breadcrumbs leading to a gingerbread house. There were pictures of him with various women at medical conferences, charity galas, and professional events. I recognized Emma in 3 of the photos, all taken within the last 6 months. In one, they were with a group of medical professionals at what looked like a conference reception. Emma was smiling, but she was standing a little too close to Felix, her hand resting on his arm in a way that suggested familiarity. The second photo was from a hospital fundraiser. Emma was wearing a black dress I had never seen, and Felix had his arm around her waist. The caption read, "Great turnout for the Children's Hospital benefit. Thanks to all the amazing healthcare professionals who make a difference every day. Medical community, charity, blessed." The third photo was the most damning. It was from the Pacific Aid Gala, the same event where the newspaper photos Pete had shown me were taken. Emma and Felix were dancing, looking into each other's eyes with an intimacy that made my stomach turn. The caption was simple, "Dancing the night away for a great cause. Aid, Pacific, charity, good times." I took screenshots of all three photos and saved them to my phone. Then I did some more digging. Felix's wife, Dr. Catherine Dalton, also had a social media presence, though hers was more professional and less self-aggrandizing. Her Instagram consisted mostly of medical articles, family photos with her 2 kids, and pictures of her garden. She seemed like a nice, intelligent, successful woman, completely unaware that her husband was sleeping with married nurses. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was in the same position I had been in 2 weeks ago, trusting her spouse, believing in her marriage, having no idea that her life was about to implode. But that sympathy didn't stop me from taking screenshots of her photos too. By the time I left the library, I had a complete dossier on Felix Dalton, his habits, his hangouts, his social circle, most importantly, his weaknesses. The man was vain, careless, and apparently addicted to social media attention. That was going to be his downfall. I went back to the hospital and spent the afternoon fixing a broken elevator in the surgical wing. It was mechanical work that left my brain free to plan. Emma and Felix thought they were being clever, sneaking around, keeping their affair a secret, but they had left a trail of evidence that a blind man could follow. The question was, what to do with that evidence? Pete found me in the maintenance shop after my shift with 2 cups of coffee that smelled like they had been brewing since the Clinton administration. "You look like a man with a plan," he said, handing me one of the cups. "Maybe you want to share it?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I had taken at the library. Pete whistled softly as he scrolled through them. "Felix Dalton isn't exactly subtle, is he? About as subtle as a brick through a window. So what are you thinking?" I took a sip of the terrible coffee and considered my options. Emma's lawyer wants me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. She wants to make sure none of this gets out, and I'm thinking that maybe the public has a right to know what kind of people are representing their medical community. Pete grinned. "I like where this is going. The question is how to make it public without looking like I'm the bitter ex-husband trying to get revenge." "Leave that to me," Pete said. "I have a few ideas." The next day was Friday, and the hospital was buzzing with weekend excitement. Emma was working the day shift in the ER, and according to the schedule I had memorized, she would be getting off at 7. Felix's shift at Presbyterian ended at 6, which would give him just enough time to drive over and meet her. I positioned myself in the parking lot at 6:30, sitting in my truck with a clear view, both of the employee entrance and the visitor parking area. I didn't have to wait long. Felix's BMW pulled into the visitor's lot at 6:45, right on schedule. He parked in the same spot where Emma used to park her Honda. Apparently, they had worked out some kind of system. Felix got out of the car, checked his reflection in the window, and walked toward the hospital entrance. He was exactly what I expected from his photos. Tall, dark, handsome in that polished way that comes from expensive grooming and regular trips to the gym. He was wearing scrubs that looked like they had been tailored, and he moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. I waited. At 7:15, Emma came out of the employee entrance. She had changed out of her work scrubs and was wearing jeans and a sweater I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. She looked around the parking lot, saw Felix leaning against his BMW, and smiled. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen on her in months. Genuine, happy, unguarded, the kind of smile that used to be reserved for me. They hugged like lovers who had been apart for days instead of hours. Felix spun her around, and Emma laughed, a sound that carried across the parking lot and hit me like a physical blow. I raised my phone and started recording. They talked for a few minutes, standing close together, Felix's hands on Emma's waist, Emma's fingers toying with the collar of his shirt. Then Felix opened the passenger door of the BMW, and Emma got in. I followed them at a distance. As they drove downtown, staying far enough back that they wouldn't notice me, but close enough to see where they were going. They ended up at Sneered, an expensive French restaurant that Emma and I had always talked about trying, but could never afford. I parked across the street and watched through the restaurant's large windows as they were seated at a table near the back. Felix ordered wine, probably something that cost more than I made in a day, and they sat close together, holding hands across the table like teenagers in love. I took more pictures. They stayed at the restaurant for 2 hours, talking and laughing and acting like they didn't have a care in the world, like they weren't destroying 2 marriages and hurting the people who loved them. When they finally left, I followed them to Felix's building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the financial district. They disappeared into the garage, and I knew I wouldn't be seeing Emma again until morning. I drove back to the motel with a phone full of incriminating photos and videos, feeling like a private investigator who had just cracked a big case. Emma and Felix had been careless, sloppy, overconfident. They had given me everything I needed to destroy them both. The question now was how to use it. I was lying on the bed, reviewing the photos on my phone, when I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Catherine Dalton. I think we need to talk." My blood ran cold. How had Felix's wife gotten my number? And more importantly, what did she know? I called the number. Catherine answered on the first ring. "Mr. Parker, thanks for calling me back. How did you get my number?" "I'm a doctor, Mr. Parker. I have resources, and I've been doing some investigating of my own." "What kind of investigating?" "The kind where I hired a private investigator to follow my husband because I suspected he was having an affair." Imagine my surprise when the PI's photos showed him with your wife. I sat up on the bed, my heart pounding. "What do you want?" "I want to meet with you. I think we can help each other." "Help each other how?" "By making sure our cheating spouses face the consequences of their actions." An hour later, I was sitting in a 24-hour diner across from Dr. Catherine Dalton, and I was starting to understand why Felix had risked everything to cheat on her. She was beautiful in an understated way. Intelligent eyes, reddish-brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The kind of natural elegance that doesn't need expensive clothes or jewelry to impress. She was also furious. "I've known about Felix's affairs for years," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee with mechanical precision. "But I stayed for the kids, for my career, because I thought eventually he would grow up and stop acting like a teenager." "What changed?" "This time is different. This time it's not just a fling with some nurse who knows the score. This time he's destroying someone else's marriage." She pulled out a manila folder that looked eerily similar to the one __ had shown me. "My PI has been following Felix for 3 months. These photos show him with your wife at hotels, restaurants, medical conferences. They're not just having sex, Mr. Parker, they're having a relationship." The photos were more detailed than the ones Pete had found, taken with professional equipment by someone who knew how to stay hidden. Emma and Felix at a hotel in Portland during a medical conference. Emma and Felix having dinner at restaurants around the city. Emma and Felix shopping together at an upscale mall. In every photo, they looked happy, comfortable, like a real couple instead of 2 people sneaking around behind their spouses' backs. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. Catherine's smile was cold and calculating. "I want to destroy them both. I'm not interested in doing anything illegal. Neither am I, but there are legal ways to make someone's life very difficult." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Felix thinks he's untouchable because he's a successful surgeon with a good reputation. Your wife thinks she can keep this quiet and go on with her life. They're both wrong. What do you propose a coordinated campaign? We expose their affair in a way that maximizes the damage to their careers and their reputations." "How?" Catherine opened her purse and pulled out a thumb drive. "It's all here. Photos, videos, credit card records showing hotel charges and restaurant bills. Felix has been using our joint account to fund his affair with your wife." I looked at the thumb drive as if it were a loaded gun. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Help me make sure it gets to the right people, hospital administrators, medical licensing boards, professional organizations, people who care about the ethical conduct of healthcare professionals." "And then what?" "And then we watch their careers burn." I took the thumb drive, feeling its weight in my palm. It was such a small thing, but it held enough information to destroy 2 lives. "There's one more thing," Catherine said. "I'm filing for divorce on Monday. When I do, all of this will become a matter of public record. Felix won't be able to keep it a secret anymore." "And your kids?" For the first time since I met her, Catherine's composure cracked slightly. My kids deserve better than a father who lies and cheats and thinks he can get away with it. We sat in silence for a moment. Two people whose lives had been upended by the same selfish choices made by people we had trusted. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked. Once we start down this road, there's no going back. Catherine's expression hardened. Felix made his choice when he decided to have an affair with your wife. Your wife made her choice when she decided to help him destroy our family. Now it's time for them to live with the consequences. I pocketed the thumb drive and stood up. I'll be in touch. As I drove back to the motel, I thought of Nima sleeping in Felix's penthouse bed, probably believing she had managed to keep their affair a secret. She had no idea that her world was about to come crashing down around her, and for the first time since this whole hell began, I was looking forward to watching it happen. Monday morning came gray and drizzling, which seemed appropriate for what I was about to do. I had spent the weekend studying the contents of Catherine's thumb drive, and what I had found was even more damning than I expected. Felix hadn't just been careless with his affair with Emma, he had been stupid. Credit card receipts for hotel rooms, restaurant dinners, jewelry purchases, text messages he had apparently saved to a cloud service that Catherine had access to. Photos and videos he had taken himself, probably thinking they were private. The man had documented his own affair as if he were proud of it. I got to work early and found Pete already in the security office, drinking his morning coffee and reading the paper. You look like a man on a mission, he said, looking up from the sports section. I am. I handed him a copy of the thumb drive. Catherine Dalton gave me this on Saturday night. Pete plugged the drive into his computer and whistled softly as he scrolled through the files. Felix Dalton is an idiot. That's what I thought. So what's the plan? I pulled out a list I had made over the weekend. We need to get this information to the right people, hospital administrators, medical licensing boards, professional organizations. That's a lot of people, it has to be. If we just send it to one or two places, they might try to bury it. But if it goes everywhere at once, it becomes impossible to contain. Pete finished. I like it. We spent the morning making copies of the most damning files and setting up a series of anonymous email accounts. The beauty of the internet age was that you could destroy someone's life from the comfort of your own desk, and they would never know who had done it. By lunchtime, we were ready to launch what Pete had dubbed Operation Scorched Earth. The first email went to the administrator of Mercy General with copies to the head of nursing and the chief of staff. The subject line was simple: unprofessional conduct of staff member Emma Parker. The email contained a selection of photos showing Emma with Felix in various locations, along with a brief explanation of their affair and the fact that Emma had lied about the nature of her Pacific aid mission trip. The second email went to Presbyterian Hospital, where Felix worked. This one was more detailed, including credit card receipts showing that Felix had used hospital expense accounts to pay for some of his dates with Emma. The third email went to the State Medical Licensing Board with a formal complaint about Emma's and Felix's unprofessional conduct. The fourth email went to the Pacific Aid Organization, informing them that one of their volunteers had used the mission as a cover for an extramarital affair. By the time we were done, we had sent the information to 15 different organizations and individuals. Within hours, both Emma and Felix would be facing investigations from multiple directions. You think it'll work? Pete asked as we sent the last email. It'll work, I said. The question is, how long will it take? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. At 2:30, I was replacing a broken faucet in a third-floor bathroom when I heard raised voices coming from the administrative wing. Through the thin walls, I could make out Emma's voice, high and panicked, along with what sounded like several other people talking at once. By 3, the hospital grapevine was in full swing. Tassa Morrison was practically vibrating with excitement as she whispered to anyone who would listen about how Emma had been called into an emergency meeting with the administration. They had pictures. I heard her say to another nurse. Pictures of Emma with some doctor from Presbyterian. Apparently, they've been having an affair for months. No way, the other nurse replied. Emma would never do something like that. That's what I thought. But the pictures don't lie. And get this. Apparently, she used that Pacific aid mission as a cover to spend 2 weeks with him. I kept working on the faucet, but I was listening to every word. What's going to happen to her? I don't know, but it doesn't look good. She's been suspended pending an investigation. Suspended. That was faster than I expected. At 4, Emma came looking for me. I was in the basement, cleaning my tools and pretending to be busy with routine maintenance tasks. She appeared in the doorway of the shop, her face red and splotchy from crying. "You bastard," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Hey, Emma. How's your day going? You know damn well how my day is going. You did this." I looked up from the wrench I was cleaning, trying to look confused. "Do what?" "Don't play dumb with me. Someone sent pictures to the administration. Pictures of me with Felix." "Felix, is that his name? I was wondering who you were sleeping with." She stormed into the shop, her hands clenched into fists. "I've been suspended, Will. I've been suspended pending an investigation into my professional conduct." "That's terrible. I'm sure it's all a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? They have pictures of us together. Pictures of us at restaurants, at hotels, at the Pacific Aid Gala. It sounds like someone's been doing their homework." Emma's face was getting redder by the second. "It was you. I know it was you." "Me? Emma, I'm a maintenance worker. I fix toilets and change light bulbs. I don't have access to the kind of information you're talking about." Then I shrugged. "Maybe Felix's wife found out. Maybe someone from the Pacific Aid Organization got suspicious. Maybe one of your friends got tired of covering for you. It could be anyone, really." "You're lying." "Am I? Prove it." Emma stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact instant she realized she had no proof. No way to connect me to the photos that were destroying her career. "This isn't over," she said finally. "Actually, I think it is. You made your choices, Emma. Now you get to live with the consequences." She turned and stormed out, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I went back to cleaning my tools, humming softly to myself. Phase 1 was complete. The next morning I got to work to find the hospital buzzing with news about Felix Dalton. According to the grapevine, Presbyterian Hospital had launched its own investigation after receiving anonymous tips about Felix's conduct. He had been placed on administrative leave pending a review of his expense accounts and his professional ethics. But the real bombshell came at lunch when Pete found me in the cafeteria with a copy of the morning paper. "Page 6, he said, sliding the paper across the table. "Lifestyle section." The headline read "Local Surgeon's Affair Rocks Medical Community." Below it was a picture of Felix and Emma dancing at the Pacific Aid Gala, along with a detailed account of their affair and the investigation it had triggered. The article was devastating. It portrayed Felix as a serial womanizer who had preyed on vulnerable married women throughout his career. Emma was portrayed as his latest victim, but the article made it clear that she had been a willing participant in the affair. "How did this get in the paper?" I asked Pete. "Catherine Dalton held a press conference yesterday afternoon. Said she was tired of her husband's behavior being covered up by the medical establishment." I had to admire Catherine's strategy. By going public, she had made it impossible for anyone to sweep the affair under the rug. Felix and Emma were now the subjects of public scrutiny, and their careers were effectively over. My phone vibrated with a text from Emma. "You've destroyed my life. I hope you're happy." I deleted the message without replying. Over the next few days, the story continued to grow. More women came forward with stories about Felix's inappropriate behavior. The Pacific Aid Organization announced that they were reviewing their volunteer screening process. Both Mercy General and Presbyterian Hospital promised to strengthen their codes of professional conduct. Emma tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. She left voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to furious accusations, but I deleted them all without listening completely. On Thursday, Pete brought me more news. "Felix Dalton has been fired," he said. "Presbyterian Hospital announced it this morning. They're also referring the case to the Medical Licensing Board for possible disciplinary action." And Emma, she's still suspended, but the word on the street is they're probably going to fire her too. They can't have a nurse on staff who's been publicly outed for having an affair with a doctor from another hospital. I felt a moment of something that might have been guilt. Emma had made terrible choices, but she was still the woman I had been married to for 8 years. Seeing her career implode was satisfying, but it was also final. There would be no coming back from this. But then I remembered the photo of her dancing with Felix, the lies about the malaria pills, the STD she had brought home like a souvenir. The guilt faded. "Is there anything else?" Pete said. "Catherine Dalton wants to meet with you again." We met that night at the same diner where we had first planned our revenge. Catherine looked tired but satisfied, like someone who has just finished a difficult but necessary task. "It's over," she said without preamble. "Felix has been fired. His medical license is under review, and our divorce will be final in 6 months. And the kids? They're better off without him. Felix was never much of a father anyway, too busy with his career and his affairs to pay attention to his own children. Any regrets? Catherine considered the question for a moment. No. Felix made his choices, and now he has to live with them. Just like your wife, ex-wife. I corrected. The divorce papers were finalized yesterday. How do you feel about it? Relieved mostly. It's over. I can move on with my life. What will you do now? I thought about that. For the last month, my entire focus had been on exposing Emma's and Felix's affair and making sure they faced the consequences of their actions. Now that it was done, I wasn't sure what came next. I don't know, I admitted. Find a new job, maybe start over somewhere else. You could stay and fight for your position at the hospital. Why would I want to do that? Everyone there knows what happened. I'll always be the guy whose wife cheated on him with a doctor. Catherine smiled. Or you could be the guy who refused to be a victim. The guy who fought back and won. She was right. Emma and Felix had tried to destroy my marriage and my life. But in the end, they had destroyed themselves. I had come out of this mess with my dignity intact, while they had lost everything. You might be right, I said. I know I'm right. Felix thought he was untouchable because he was a successful surgeon. Your ex-wife thought she could lie and cheat without consequences. They were both wrong. We sat in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. Two people who had been through hell and come out the other side. There's one more thing, Catherine said. Finally, Felix has been trying to contact Emma since this all started. Apparently, he wants to run away together, start over somewhere else. What did she say? According to my sources, she told him to go to hell. It seems she blames him for ruining her life. I laughed in spite of myself. Even now, she can't take responsibility for her own choices. Some people never learn. Catherine was right about that. Emma would probably spend the rest of her life blaming other people for the consequences of her own actions. Felix would probably do the same, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I drove back to the motel that night, feeling lighter than I had in months. Emma's and Felix's affair had destroyed my marriage, but it had also freed me from a relationship that had been slowly dying for years. I was 40 years old, divorced, and starting from scratch, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to seeing what came next. The next morning, I went to work with a new sense of purpose. I had a job to do, equipment to fix, a life to rebuild. Emma and Felix were yesterday's news. Their affair was already being replaced by newer gossip in the hospital rumor mill. I was replacing a broken door handle in the pediatric wing when Tassa Morrison approached me. She looked nervous, as if she wasn't sure how I would react to seeing her. Will, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure, what's on your mind? I wanted to apologize for taking Emma's side in all of this, for not seeing what she was really doing. You don't need to apologize. Emma fooled a lot of people. Still, I should have known better. You're a good guy, and you didn't deserve what she did to you. Thanks. I appreciate that. Tassa hesitated. Then she said, for what it's worth, I think Emma got what she deserved. What they both deserved. I finished installing the door handle and packed up my tools. Maybe, but it's over now. Time to move on. You're going to stay at the hospital for now. We'll see what happens. As Tassa walked away, I realized I had made my decision. I wasn't going to run away from Mercy General. I wasn't going to let Emma's betrayal drive me out of a job I had held for 8 years. I was going to stay and rebuild my life right here, in full view of everyone who had witnessed my marriage fall apart. Let them see how a real man handles adversity. Let them see what it's like to survive and thrive after betrayal. Let them see that Will Parker wasn't a victim, he was a survivor. And if Emma or Felix ever showed their faces around here again, let them see what they had lost when they threw away everything we had built together. I was done being the nice guy, done being the understanding husband, done being the victim of other people's selfish choices. From now on, I was writing my own story, and it was going to have a much better ending than theirs.